With the surprising release of Cuphead on the Nintendo Switch in April of 2019, and with Microsoft going as far to bring Xbox Live to the Switch as well, there's been lots of talk throughout the gaming world of partnership between Microsoft and Nintendo. After all, this was the first time that Microsoft had explicitly asked for one of their games to be put onto a Nintendo system, right? Well, not exactly. Cuphead is only the most recent of nearly 20 Microsoft games developed for a Nintendo system. What's crazier is that I can't even call all of these games Xbox games, because 3 of them were released before the original Xbox hit store shelves. Those 3 games are the subject of today's video, so let's turn back the clock almost 20 years and go back to the good old days of the Game Boy Color as we look at the first Microsoft games that were made for a Nintendo system. All 3 of Microsoft's Game Boy endeavors were essentially demakes of established Microsoft Windows properties, and often hit the GBC well after their original PC release. Nintendo getting late game ports, some things never change. The first game we'll dive into today is the Microsoft Entertainment Pack, The Puzzle Collection, originally released on Windows in 1997 and ported to the Game Boy Color in the fall of 2000. The Game Boy release takes 6 of the Windows version's 10 puzzle games and crunches them down into cartridge form, leaving Fringer, Charmer, Mixed Genetics, and Muddled Casino off, likely due to storage limitations. Considering that I've never heard of any of those games, I'm gonna say that Game Boy owners made out pretty okay on this one. How do these puzzle games stack up though? After all, over a quarter of Game Boy owners already had the greatest puzzle game of all time, Tetris. What could convince players to buy any other puzzler besides Alexei Pajitnov's masterpiece? Well, get this, the Puzzle Collection was developed primarily by that very same man. Microsoft had hired Pajitnov in 1996 to chase after Tetris's legacy and develop new puzzle games for Windows platforms. And in some strange twist of fate, this game ended up on the same Nintendo platform that Tetris had helped make. Sadly, the Puzzle Collection, like many of Pajitnov's post-Tetris games, didn't capture that same magic. Of the 6 games featured here, I would call maybe 2 of them fun. Going down the list, first up on the menu is Jewel Chase, which I wouldn't really even call a puzzle game if I'm being totally honest. In this minigame, you're playing as Master Hand's older cousin, Dave Hand, going through this multicolored disco floor collecting jewelry that other dancers dropped. At least that's my headcanon for this story. The only catch is that Dave Hand can only walk on one color of floor tile at once in this endless high-level game of the floor is lava. If you try to move in the direction of, say, a green tile when you're on a blue tile, Dave will use his hand family powers to leap to the nearest blue tile in that direction. Placed throughout the floor are color swap tiles that let you change your active color, thus letting you collect the other treasures. Once you've collected all those treasures, move over to the exit space and then you'll move on to the next level. That's the entire game, and there's rarely much challenge even on the higher difficulties. When you're playing on beginner, it's just you walking through these very easy levels, but when you play on hard, there's another hand walking around taking your treasure. The only purpose this enemy hand serves is to take away from your final score, which isn't saved anywhere anyway, and to try to beat you to the exit once all the treasure is collected. Even if you get every single piece of treasure, you'll lose if you're not the first to the exit, so this forces you to plan out your path at least a little bit. Even still, that's not too difficult, but there's at least a little bit of spice here in an otherwise cute game. Next up is Spring Weekend, which is easily the weakest game in this set. You'll move your cursor around these patches of plants, pressing A and B to rotate the plants surrounding your cursor clockwise and counterclockwise respectively, with your goal being to match the picture in the upper corner within a certain number of spins. Like in Jewel Chase, there are multiple difficulties, in this case beginner and normal, but unlike Jewel Chase, Spring Weekend simply doesn't work properly on that beginner difficulty. Your spin counter can hit 0 and the game will just continue, and even if you beat a level with many spins left, you gain no score whatsoever. Actually, now that I think about it, even on normal, your score resets every level anyway, so this game just doesn't work in general. At least on normal, if you don't beat the level in a certain number of spins, you do get a game over, but that's it really. It won't keep your attention for more than a few minutes tops. Third on the Puzzle Collection's lineup is, Lineup. This game is sort of like Tetris's bastard child. Well, another one. If you've watched my video on Tetris's insane sequels, you already know that Tetris had a lot of bastard children. Lineup features the return of gaming's biggest sin, pentaminos, and somehow makes everything you've ever liked about Tetris feel gross. Here, your blocks don't drop from the top of the screen. Instead, you place them wherever you'd like, but for no good reason, you can't spin those blocks. However they appear is the way they've gotta stay. When, or I guess if, you're able to make a straight line from one side of the screen to the other, every block in that line disappears entirely, not just the line itself, which frees up more board space for you to continue. As you continue to clear more and more lines, the speed at which new blocks show up in your queue will increase, and the game ends when that queue on the right side of your screen is filled up. This means that while you can take as long as you'd like finding the perfect spot for any one block, you could be risking a game over if you take too long. Lineup just wasn't all that fun for me. The ability to spin blocks would have gone a long way towards making it feel like a neat Tetris knockoff, but instead it just falls flat. Finke Flush is the fourth up on the list, and I would argue it's both the most complex and the best game in the entire puzzle collection. You're given control of 4 different 4x4 grids at any given point, and at the top of the screen are pre-arranged vertical stacks of marbles that you've got to use to fill these grids up. When you fill all 16 spots on any given grid with marbles, you'll earn a point towards your score, and that grid will empty back up. However, as the game progresses, marbles of different colors will enter the fray, and a grid must be entirely of the same color for it to clear off of your board. This means you're forced to strategize around the marbles that come in, their alignment, and your boards all at once. You can swap out between your boards at any point with the D-pad, you can rotate your active board with the B button, and you can move between the different stacks of marbles on top with the D-pad as well. And of course, as you clear more grids, the speed of the marbles lining up in your queue increases as well, but with another unique twist. Since you can always move that queue around to choose which marble stack you want to drop, the game locks these marbles into a set horizontal box. If the stack you need is all the way on the left side of the queue and you've got too many stacks piled up to the right of it, you might hit that wall and not be able to make that crucial placement. Even in early levels and on easy difficulties, when you're still playing with just one marble type, you're forced to think simultaneously on several different levels as you're building out as many optimal grids as possible. Down the road, you'll start seeing yellow X's appear that let you clear out a misplaced marble or open up an extra space for a better fit. In short, Finke Flush has way more depth than it has any right to, and for me at least, it captured that same addictive it factor that Tetris has. I just wish I knew what the hell that name is supposed to mean. Next up is Color Collision, a minigame where you play as a Windows screensaver. I'm not kidding, you're just a screensaver here, floating around the screen and changing colors as you collide with lines or circles. If you don't collide with an object the same color as your screensaver, you'll lose some health, although the health bar doesn't actually work too well here. That seems to be par for the course. The inner color of the circles you collide with will show you what color you'll morph into next. For example, if you hit a yellow circle that has a pink center, your screensaver is gonna turn pink after that. The catch is, like so many Windows screensavers in the 90s, you can only move diagonally. The D-pad therefore adjusts the direction that you're moving in, not the exact position. On the left side of the screen is a counter of how many shapes you've got to successfully hit in order to beat that level, and as you make longer chains, you'll both increase in speed and see some sort of score multiplier on the bottom that shows you what you've cleared. I'm not entirely sure what this does, but it does make me feel good about myself, so I'll take it. Each level also has a unique bonus objective, suggesting you, for example, run into shapes only when the face inside is smiling for extra points, but there's no real penalty for not doing these as far as I can tell. Plus, it's not exactly easy to read those objectives with a thick red outline behind white text on a blue background. Jesus, who thought that was a good idea? This game's a neat diversion, but nothing more. Finally, we have Rat Poker, which is just a spin on lemmings. Rats of various colors will walk out onto a unique stage in every level, pausing at a set checkpoint before circling back up to the start and repeating the cycle. Your goal is to use each level's tools to shift around the order of the rats as they move so that you have groups of 3 or more in one continuous color, sort of like a poker hand. Yes, that is why it's called Rat Poker. God help me. Once you have a valid rat poker hand lined up at the checkpoint, they'll take the exit, freeing up space for more rats to enter the fray. If the level fills up with rats before you can clear out enough lines, it's game over. While it starts off pretty tame, the chaos quickly ramps up, with faster rat spawns, more poker hands you can make, new rat colors, and more advanced tools. There are even rats that spawn with plus or minus signs that will double or halve the value of any hand that they're attached to. Despite there being only 20 levels, they get so fast so quickly that you could spend a good amount of time on this game just trying to get a single level down pat. That said, it makes for a fun, hectic time, although it could easily be too frustrating too quickly for many. All in all, the puzzle collection is a bit of a forgettable time, with a few gems sprinkled in. It's a totally passable Game Boy Color game, and as a port it seems to hold up decently well to its Windows predecessor, but probably the most impressive thing about this game is that the soundtrack is magnificent. Seriously, I've been listening to the Jewel Chase theme on and off since I first played the puzzle collection, and that was 2 months ago! Listen to this! If there was ever a time for me to drop one of these, it is right now. Ooh, the music! Another song has this fantastic jazz flourish. This is somehow one of the best Game Boy soundtracks I've ever heard. Why? The second of Microsoft's GBC offerings is Microsoft Pinball Arcade, which hit store shelves in the US in May 2001. While the original 1998 release contained 7 pinball tables, this Game Boy version only has 5, cutting out Humpty Dumpty and Cue Ball Wizard. The tables included all have some level of historical relevance, and in fact, I would sort of classify Pinball Arcade as half game, half history lesson. The 5 tables here take you down the timeline of pinball's evolution, starting with Baffle Ball, which bears more resemblance to something like Pachinko than pinball as you know it. From there, it crosses another half-century of pinball history, showing the evolution into 2-inch bumpers and skill-based play, and then the evolution even further into larger 3-inch bumpers, flashing lights, multi-tiered pinball tables, and much more. As a sort of digital museum for younger pinball fans, it's really neat. It's even got several pages of history text that you can scroll through, detailing games made both by Gottlieb, the company that owned all the games featured here, as well as its competitors. Wait, scroll up. What did that say? The last single-player game ever released. As a game, Pinball Arcade is okay, I guess. Since it goes through the history of pinball, that means that the games are a little underwhelming to somebody who's played the newest and flashiest that pinball has to offer. Everything handles just fine, although the screen is a bit too zoomed in for my taste in most of these games, and the ball sometimes does feel a bit floatier than I'd personally like. I will say that one feature I absolutely adore here is the custom button mapping. Before you start a round, you can choose to change the button configuration to your liking. Do you want A and B to be your left and right bumpers and set the D-pad to shake the table? Go for it! I can't think of any other Game Boy games that let you change your button mapping like this. Hell, some games even today mess this up. The tables that offered multiplayer in real life offer the same here, with up to 4 players passing the Game Boy around for their respective turns. There's a solid enough variety both visually and mechanically between each of the 5 tables as well, even if I only really liked Spirit of 76 and Slick Chick. I'd argue something like Baffle Ball is a bit of a wasted inclusion though, since almost everybody would play it maybe once or twice and then move on to the more modern tables. If they'd replaced Baffle Ball with Cue Ball Wizard, the newest of the 7 tables featured in the Windows release, it probably would have made this a better game at the cost of being a slightly weaker history piece. I don't think there's that much crossover between pinball historians and Game Boy owners, so that's a sacrifice I would have been willing to make. Now that said, I can't deny that Pinball Arcade was certainly crafted with love. I respect the attention to detail that went in here despite those limitations. Every table featured has its own tips page to tell you what to look out for, what scores earn you an extra ball, and so on. And in addition to the history pages, there's a neat little pinball quiz to test what you've learned from the game. I would have liked for it to be an actual quiz instead of just have the answers pasted below every question, but hey, can't win them all. Pinball Arcade is a totally serviceable experience. At least it saves your high scores, unlike the Puzzle Collection, but I would say there are probably better pinball games on the Game Boy Color, let alone overall. Not long after Pinball Arcade came the final Game Boy Microsoft title, Microsoft Best of Entertainment Pack. According to my research, this game hit stores in the United States in June 2001, but if it did, you wouldn't be able to tell really. Every American listing online confuses the game with the Puzzle Collection cartridge, so I could only find European carts. Either it sold incredibly poorly here, or every single person that bought it locked it away forever. That's kind of a shame, because of the 3 games, this is the best by far. Upon booting up the Best of Entertainment Pack, you're presented with a cute little main menu that looks like a Windows desktop, and you're presented with each of the 7 games as its own desktop icon. The original Windows release featured 13 games, a sort of greatest hits from the 4 entertainment packs that Microsoft had introduced in previous years to make Windows more appetizing for regular households. Obviously, looking back, that seems to have worked, as these casual little games arguably helped usher Windows into wide acceptance in an era of rapidly expanding technological literacy. I'm not exactly sure why it took 6 years for this collection to get ported to the Game Boy though. The GBC release features some of the most iconic Windows games ever. Raise your hand if any of these sound familiar. Minesweeper. Did you actually put your hand up? I can't see you, idiot. Along with Minesweeper came Freecell, Tuts Tomb, TriPeaks, Ski Free, Life Genesis, and Tic Tac Toe. I'm sure you've seen several of these throughout the years if you've ever had Windows 3.1 onward, as they eventually just got bundled into the OS. This also means that I hopefully don't have to explain a few of them, which is nice because I've spent 15 minutes talking about some Game Boy games. What is my life? Even nicer than that, this game has in-depth explanations for every game on the list, and even a full, unique options menu for each as well, but we'll talk about that as we go through each of the games. I probably don't need to explain what Freecell is. Just about everybody who's used Windows has played it at least once, but here goes. It's Solitaire, but better. Instead of regular Solitaire's draw pile, every card is face up immediately, and you can use the 4 cells in the top left corner to hold cards and make better moves. These cells also determine how many cards you can move at any given point. If your cells are full, you can only move 1 card at a time, while if they're empty or free, get it, Freecell, you can move up to a 5 stack at once. The reason I say that Freecell is better than Solitaire is because, thanks to the lack of a draw pile, almost every single randomly generated deal is solvable. Whether you win or lose is entirely up to how you play. The original Windows release of Freecell had 32,000 different deals, with only a single one being unsolvable. And get this version of Freecell here on the Game Boy Color somehow fits every single one of these deals onto a cartridge along with the other 6 games that are featured. While it's a little bit clunkier than the traditional Windows version, this is functionally a picture-perfect port, which blows my mind. Even the things the Game Boy Color version can't do contextually, like moving a single card versus moving a whole stack when both are valid moves, are solved through the use of a pop-up window, and you can even undo a move if you press the wrong button. A faithful Game Boy port of Freecell certainly isn't the most interesting technological achievement I've ever heard of, but it's still incredibly impressive. Next up is Tuts Tomb, also known as Pyramid Solitaire. Fittingly, you play with a stacked pyramid of cards, and your goal is to combine pairs of cards together so that they add up to 13. Aces are 1, jacks are 11, queens are 12, and kings don't need to be paired at all because they're already valued at 13. The remaining cards are put into your draw pile, and you'll draw 3 cards each time you flip that pile. If you can successfully clear the pyramid, you win. Yay! There's also a scoring system that gives you a dollar score based on how many times you flip your draw pile and how long you take. I used to always end up in the negatives as a kid because I was just bad at this game. Less yay. On the bright side, you can change the scoring type, turn off the timer, or even change the amount of cards you draw every flip from 3 to 1 because this Game Boy Color game has more customizable gameplay options than some modern games. Yet again, this is an incredibly faithful transition onto the Game Boy, even down to the customizable art on the back of the cards. TriPeaks has a similar layout to Tuts Tomb, but it has 3 pyramids instead of 1, so it's automatically better. Only the bottom row of the pyramid starts face up, but as you clear off any attached cards, the cards above it will flip up so that you can then see their value. Here you have to make a snaking pile by linking cards either one higher or one lower than the card next to your draw pile. This means that if you start off with, say, a 5, you can pull from the pyramids a 4, then a 3, then a 4, then a 5, then a 6, then a 7, and so on, and put together as long a chain as possible. Each card you pull from the pyramid will give you $1 towards your total score, and every time you draw a new card from your draw pile, you lose $5. Clearing any 2 of the peaks will give you $15 each, and then if you clear all 3, you'll get a $30 bonus. What usually happens is that you'll end up owing this game a lot of money by the time you're done because your score carries over from game to game. That said, I like this one. It's short, it's fun, and it's arguably the simplest of the 3 card games here, so it's probably the best for younger kids. Alright, here's the one you've all been waiting for, Ski Free. This is a game I feel like we all played way too much of when we were kids without realizing how anything actually worked in it. I know I personally would play it every now and then for about 3 minutes or so before moving on to something else. Ski Free is a downhill skiing game with one of 3 game modes that you pick from when you're at the top of the mountain. 2 of the modes are slalom runs, where you'll bob and weave around flag markers trying to reach the goal in the fastest time possible. On one side is a basic practice course, on the other is a harder one that has trees, rocks, and other obstacles. Or for your third option, you can just ride down at your leisure, freestyling, doing jumps, running into kids because they're in your way, trying not to run over the dogs because the dogs did nothing wrong, and, of course, running from the abominable snowman as he chases you down to try to eat you. Once you pass about 2,000 meters, this Yeti will chase you down and eventually make you his lunch. There is no escape here, this Yeti will always win. Really, if you think about it, Ski Free is kind of a horror game. As far as the Game Boy port goes, the art is naturally slightly different, the screen is far more zoomed in, and for some reason the style score that you'd rack up by doing tricks is just gone. Then again, the only trick the game ever had was jump, so hey, this isn't SSX. Moving on to one that almost none of you have ever heard of, I know I hadn't, is Life Genesis. This is on paper the most complex game that I've talked about today, as it's intended as a full-on simulator of life at a cellular level, at least based on the rules set forth in the game, or as they're known here, the facts of life.
The facts of life!
Every turn you'll spawn one more blue cell and delete one red cell from the map, and then the computer player will do the inverse, with the goal being to wipe out the opposing cells entirely. Cells can only have 2 or 3 neighbors surrounding them, so you've got to place them very carefully. If a cell has fewer than 2 neighbors, it'll die of isolation, and having more than 3 cells nearby will kill it due to overcrowding. Moreover, if an empty space has 3 cells surrounding it, a new cell will spawn there next turn. This makes for a cute little strategy game where you're trying to isolate enemy cells while helping yours thrive. There are a few more smaller rules here and there, but that's the gist of it. In practice, the computer opponent simply isn't very good, so it's pretty hard to lose Life Genesis. When it's your opponent's turn, they'll usually, for whatever reason, place their new red cell by itself, which means that it's gonna die the next turn anyway. I think that's more of a limitation of the Game Boy's hardware than anything, but even still, the computer's smart enough to put up a fight for at least a little while, especially on the higher difficulties. There was one game where they almost had me beat, but for some reason the game said I had more cells alive than I did, and that kept me going long enough to win the Nobel Prize. Not the Nobel Prize, no, the Nobel Prize. Oops. As the game progresses, you'll see really cool cell shapes being made with each turn. It's just kind of neat to observe. If you're so inclined, you can also edit together your own board to test out your own experiments, rather than playing with a random board every time. Seeing the natural progression of the boards that you design is so neat. I recommend trying Life Genesis out, if not on the Game Boy, then somewhere on PC, because this game is just kinda cool. I'm not explaining how Minesweeper works. I'm just not. You've all played it, and if you haven't, what's wrong with you? Unlike the Windows version you're used to, there's naturally no size options here on the Game Boy Color version of Minesweeper, so you'll be stuck with this smaller playing field for however long you wish to play. Really, Minesweeper probably has the least customizability of any of the games featured in the Best of Entertainment pack. The only thing you can do is change the difficulty by tossing more bombs into the playing field. Otherwise, everything's here. The bombs, the field, the numbers, the flags, and yes, even the question marks. Those are my favorite. It's a fully serviceable release, even if the game size is locked down. Far more interesting than Minesweeper is our final game, Tic Tactics, although maybe only in theory rather than in practice. Tic Tactics is not the candy with a stutter. No, it's just 3D Tic Tac Toe. 3 isometric Tic Tac Toe boards are stacked on top of one another, and your aim is to line up 3 in a row however you can. This means that you can stack them all across one board like regular Tic Tac Toe, you can stack vertically in the same grid space across all 3 boards, or you can stack diagonally, say in the top left of the top board, the middle of the middle board, and the bottom right of the bottom board. Naturally, this added dimension magnifies the strategy of this classic game immensely, to the point that I lost more games than I expected to, and to the medium level AI at that. The expert difficulty just completely rocked me, and don't get me started about the 4x4x4 mode. This thing is like the Pentaminos in Tetris. Don't add more to something just because it was fun as it was. That only causes pain. Look at that. That is disgusting. If you're scarred like I was after playing this mode, there's mercifully a regular Tic-Tac-Toe mode as well. And that's about everything that the Best of Entertainment pack has to offer. It doesn't have the killer soundtrack that the Puzzle Collection does, but it's definitely got the most love put into it out of the 3 Microsoft Game Boy Color games. The full how to play and strategy sections, full customizability options for most of the games, and again, it's got a Windows menu theme. That's just amazing. Frankly though, I'm still amazed that any of these exist at all. They've naturally been forgotten over time, but hopefully I've brought a little bit of light back to these precursors to Microsoft and Nintendo's current friendship, or, dare I say, partnership. These 2 juggernauts have been intertwined heavily throughout the last 2 decades, especially in the generation after the Game Boy Color, when Microsoft bought up one of Nintendo's stalwart second-party studios, Rareware. Rare had 5 games in development for the Game Boy Advance at the time of the purchase, and rather than just cancel them all, Microsoft decided, well, let's just say that there are twice as many Microsoft games on the GBA, and I'll save that topic for another time. Which of these games did you find the most interesting? Let me know down in the comments below, and while you're down there, don't forget to hit the like button to help the channel grow, and subscribe for more if you're not already. As always, thank you very much for watching, and stay golden. This video was made possible in part thanks to the generous support of these Patreon backers. If you'd like to see your name on this list, you can do so by supporting the channel at patreon.com/thegoldenbolt. Thank you.